Salve mates, I hope everything is covered in Italian sunshine at your end. In today's video I'm gonna rank 9 Roman capitals from the best to the worst. Because believe it or not, city of Rome was not the only capital city of the empire. In this ranking we're judging Roman cities from the 3rd to 5th century using 4 criteria. First one, geostrategic position. Was the city close to the Rhine, Danube or Persian frontiers? The second one is state capacity. Can you govern actually from the city? It measures what the city actually had: population, government buildings, emperor's presence. Prestige. Does it carry symbolic weight? The soft power, reputation, cultural legacy. And the final one is defensibility. Did it lay on open plains or was it a mountain fortress? How well the city could resist before being conquered. So without any more explanation, let's start from the bottom. Number 9, Trier, Augusta Treverorum. At the bottom of the barrel we start with Augusta Treverorum, or as we're gonna historically call it, Trier to save time. Once dubbed the second Rome of Gaul, Trier had ambition, but couldn't quite hold the empire's weight for long. Trier scores a 2 for geostrategic position for being close to the Rhine, making it practical for operations in Germania, but it had no sea access. It was entirely disconnected from the Danube and the east. As a western outpost, Trier made sense, but as a capital for the entire Roman Empire, it was too far to rank higher. On state's capacity, Trier deserves a 3. From the 3rd century, emperors like Maximian, Constantius and Constantine used Trier as a residence, and it became a seat of the Praetorian prefect for Gaul. However, even at its peak, the city may have had only 20,000 people and a modest palace complex and a basilica in comparison with other capitals. Prestige is a 4. Trier had some visibility as a western imperial seat and was known as the second Rome of Gaul. Its time as an imperial capital gave it some symbolic weight, but this was short-lived. It lacked deep historical tradition, it lacked religious authority or long-term cultural influence, especially compared to cities like Rome or Antioch. Its reputation was tied to brief dynastic use rather than lasting imperial identity. Defensibility gets a 3. Trier had a strong late antique walls and dozens of towers, but its flat position on the Rhine made it vulnerable. It was sacked 4 times by Franks in the 4th century, showing that its fortifications and flat terrain position were not enough to stop repeated attacks. Number 8, Sirmium. Climbing up 1 notch we reach Sirmium, a fortress turned into a purple experiment. Sirmium was a city that produced emperors, but not crowds. Sirmium scores 8 for geostrategy thanks to its central position in the Balkans. Sitting on the Sava and Danube, it connected Italy, Danube frontier and the Balkan. But no sea access means it never hits a 9 or a 10. State capacity, just a 3. It hosted emperors and had some military infrastructure, but no major bureaucracy, basilicas or long-term institutions. It was more of a war camp than a city. In prestige, Sirmium earns the lowest possible score: no legacy, no consuls, no monuments. Its reputation was largely military rather than symbolic. And its defensibility is a weak 2, totally exposed on a flat land and repeatedly conquered. The Huns took it in 441, the Avars in 582, after which it was abandoned. Number 7, Nicomedia. Next up is Nicomedia, the capital that Constantinople put out of business. For a brief moment it was the beating heart of the East, before history moved just a little further down the Bosporus. For prestige, Nicomedia receives a score of 2. It was important in the early 4th century, especially under Diocletian, and it hosted imperial courts and Christian persecution edicts. But its legacy faded quickly. No deep cultural, religious or symbolic weight remained. Its prominence was short-lived, tied to the Tetrarchy. Geostrategically, Nicomedia scores a 7. Its location allowed coordination of campaigns towards Persia or Danube River, and it had maritime access. However, it did not control the Bosporus directly, and it lacked the central reach of Constantinople. Defensibility for Nicomedia rates at 4. The city was exposed along the coast of northwestern Asia Minor, backed by hills but not protected by water or a peninsula like Constantinople. It also suffered destruction from a major earthquake in 358, followed by a fire which completed the disaster. Nicomedia was rebuilt, but on a much smaller scale. Number 6. Antioch. Coming in 6th, we find Antioch, the cradle of Christianity, but not of Roman permanence. It was ancient, glorious, and deeply symbolic, but it was too exposed and never truly in command. Antioch was the empire's third largest city. Famous as a great Hellenistic and Christian city, Antioch's prestige was very high, earning it a score of 7 for prestige. Christians called it the cradle of Christianity. The term Christian was first used in Antioch, and its name carried cultural weight, although the fame was diminishing from the 5th century onwards. Traditionally Syria's capital, Antioch was one of the empire's great cities, with an estimated peak population of 250,000, the HQ and the seat of the Praetorian Prefect of the East. Its complex infrastructure, aqueducts, sanitation, allowed it to support imperial officials and troops. However, it was never a permanent seat of emperors. Only Constantius II used it as a capital. For that, Antioch receives a 6 for state's capacity. Antioch scores a 5 for geostrategic position. It's set near the Orontes River, close to the Persian frontier, and key east-west trade routes, with access to the Mediterranean through its distant harbor. But it was far from the Rhine and Danube frontiers and couldn't respond quickly to northern threats. Also, by the 4th century, its port was silting up, limiting naval reliability. A strong eastern hub, but geographically cut off from the empire's broader military priorities. Antioch's defenses were modest, giving it a defensibility score of just 1. Although it had a city walls and the Orontes River acting as a moat, its hinterland plains offered little defense. It suffered from multiple Persian sackings and devastating earthquakes. Its fortifications were strong on paper, but not strong in the face of a determined siege. Number 5. Ravenna. Halfway through the list, here's Ravenna, the city that hid in swamp and called it strategy. Surrounded by marshes and swamps, it endured when others fell, but never inspired glory beyond its walls. Ravenna's setting was highly defensible, earning it a perfect 10 for defensibility. The city lay among swamps and marshes with only a canal connection to the sea. It withstood threats that toppled other cities. For example, sieges by Theodoric dragged on for years. In short, Ravenna's combination of swamps and fortifications made it very secure. In 402, Honorius made Ravenna the Western Imperial capital. The court, senatorial deputies and military command staffs were based in Ravenna. Though smaller than Rome or Mediolanum, Ravenna had a full imperial government. This gives Ravenna a state's capacity score of 5. Functional and active, but on a more modest scale than older or larger capitals. Ravenna's prestige was regional at best, which earns it a prestige score of 2. It was valued for practical defense, not tradition or symbolic glory. It was an ancient legendary city, had no famous consuls, and had only second-grade emperors as Valentinian III and Honorius in it. Ravenna's canal connection linked it to the Eastern Empire, however it sat far from Gaul or Rhine frontiers. With a geostrategic score of 4, it lacked proximity to major frontiers, had poor access to Gaul and the other western provinces, and was distant from Italy's main grain routes. Also, land road connectivity was weak compared to Mediolanum, Rome or Thessalonica. Number 4. Mediolanum. A little higher we have Mediolanum, the elegant city of the west. Efficient, connected and briefly powerful, it was the empire's administrative muscle. Under Diocletian and Constantine, Mediolanum was repeatedly an imperial residence, which gives it a state capacity score of 8. By 286 its population reached around 100,000, a strong boom that was however followed by a sharp decline after it lost its imperial status. Emperors Maximian and Constantine built vast complexes here, including a circus and palaces. It housed important churches, later basilicas, and imperial mint. Mediolanum held some prestige as the western capital for over a century, which earns it a prestige score of 5. It was the site of major events, most famously the Edict of Mediolanum, which granted religious tolerance. It was also in Mediolanum where Emperor Theodosius had to do a public act of penance to Bishop Ambrose, but as its reputation was functional only, once the capital moved to Ravenna, Mediolanum faded quickly. Geostrategically, Mediolanum was in northern Italy at the head of the Po Valley, making it a 7 for geostrategic position. It was a major hub in the Italian road network, close to the Rhine and Danube, and well positioned on trade routes linking Italy, Gaul and Balkans. However, it lacked access to major river or sea. This limited its capacity for strategic resupply, and in the 5th century it was indeed cut off during barbarian invasions across the Alps. In terms of defensibility, Mediolanum scores a 5. Maximian commissioned strong city walls, and these fortifications helped for a time. The city withstood barbarian threats early on, but its flat position made sieges difficult to resist. Ultimately, it was conquered by Attila in 452. Number 3, Rome. In third place, yes, just third, along with Mediolanum, is Rome, the ghost of power and a monument to it. Unmatched in prestige but too far from the action. The empire's soul, if not its steering wheel. The one and only Rome is tied with Mediolanum at the third place, mainly for its low geography score. Rome had a major port, Ostia, and roads radiating through Italy, but it lay far from the Rhine, Danube or Persia. Rome's 7 points for state's capacity reflects the catastrophic decline of the city after the 3rd century, when emperors and administration tend to dwell elsewhere. But still, the traditional capital retained institutional weight, still enormous, with senate, Lateran palace and top religious and aristocratic presence. Rome's biggest strength was its 10 out of 10 prestige. Caput mundi for centuries, Rome's symbolic status was unparalleled. Even after losing administrative supremacy, it remained the cultural and ceremonial center of the Roman world. All emperors through Constantine saw legitimacy as Roman, internal city, cultural, political, and religious symbol of the empire. Nothing comes close. Where Rome slightly lacks again is in its defensiveness. After Aurelian's fortifications, Rome was encircled by 19 kilometers of walls. These walls were formidable and delayed invaders. Rome held out against Alaric's first approaches in 409. Rome's 7 hills and swamps gave strong, natural defense, and its inland location protected it from surprise sea attacks. However, the city was eventually sacked twice in the 5th century when its 16 kilometers of walls proved too spread to be held. Number 2, Thessalonica. Runner-up is Thessalonica, the crossroads of emperors and barbarians alike. It earns a perfect 10 for geostrategy. Thessalonica gets a perfect 10 for geostrategy. On the coast, with a deep water port and the Via Egnatia cutting through it, it connected Italy, the Balkans and Asia. A large harbor gave moderate sea access. Overall, it controlled frontier transit points and major commerce routes. It was perfectly in the middle between Danube, Rhine and Persia. State capacity scores a 7. It had an imperial palace, a mint, and served as the capital of the prefecture of Macedonia. Galerius built an imperial palace and a great hippodrome there, but emperors only stayed briefly. Strong regional center, not a full-time throne. Prestige comes at 5. Thessalonica had a biblical mentions, early Christian influence. It hosted important edicts like the 380 Edict of Thessalonica, which proclaimed Christianity the state's religion, but didn't match the legendary reputations of Rome or Antioch. For defensibility, it earns a solid 7, walled, sea-supplied and consistently tough to crack. Historically, most invasions bypassed Thessalonica. During antiquity, it repelled numerous invaders. Its harbor and supply lines aided defense. The city was sacked only once by Arabs and Slavs in 904, way beyond our scope. Number 1. Constantinople. At the very top, unshaken and unbeaten, stands Constantinople, the city that rewrote the rules of the empire. Born as a new Rome, it became more Roman than the original, and held the line for 1,000 years. Constantinople earns a 9 for geostrategic position thanks to its placement on the Bosporus, linking Europe and Asia. It commanded all trade between the Black Sea and the Mediterranean, with the Golden Horn providing a superb harbor. However, it doesn't receive a perfect score. It's docked 1 point because it was slightly distant from the Rhine and western provinces. In terms of state's capacity, Constantinople scores a 9. Immense imperial palaces, Magnaura, the Great Palace, and massive churches were constructed in the city. It rapidly became the largest and wealthiest city in Europe, housing the Senate, central bureaucracy, and Praetorian prefect of the East, but it doesn't receive a perfect 10, because in the 4th and the early 5th centuries, the Constantinople was still developing. Much of its monumental and administrative infrastructure wasn't completed until the reign of Theodosius II. On prestige, Constantinople gets a 6, and that reflects both its rise and its temporal limits. As a Nova Roma, it quickly eclipsed other cities and hosted major ecumenical councils. But compared to Rome, Antioch or Alexandria, it had no legacy, no famous pagan temples, and its golden years of prestige were still in the future. Defensibility gives a full 10. Constantinople natural and engineered defenses were unbeatable. Later surrounded by triple rings of Theodosian walls on land and a chain across the Golden Horn, Constantinople was impenetrable. Its fortifications survived repeated sieges in early Middle Ages and withstood 2 massive sieges even after gunpowder arrived. An ultimate fortress city. So, from swampy backwaters to imperial juggernauts, not all capitals were the same. Constantinople may have taken the crown, but every city on the list tells a story about what the Roman Empire became. So which city would you pick as a Roman emperor? Let me know in the comments. Stay strong.